Back at one of the men who made football what it is today. Here's Chris Berman.
Gene Hickerson began as a messenger guard for legendary coach Paul Brown. And before long, everybody got the message. Just get out of his way or else there'll be hell to pay. In a career that spanned from the late 50s to the early 70s, he shined in the 60s when he was on the NFL All-Decade team. No wonder the Cleveland Browns never had a losing season when he was there. His longtime friend and former teammate Bobby Franklin saw it up close and personal with Gene Hickerson, represented today by his son Bob.
Gene Hickerson and I have been friends for approximately 52 years. We became friends when I was a freshman at the University of Mississippi. Gene was 2 years ahead of me. He was such a great athlete that the Browns drafted him his junior year. I don't think they drafted a year early unless it was someone real special, and they thought Gene was real special. Everybody knew how strong Gene was. He had great feet and had tremendous speed. Paul Brown moved him to the right guard spot where he could block and pull. He realized that Gene needed to be in there full time to be able to lead the way for the great running back Jim Brown. You don't find very often a lineman with the speed that Gene Hickerson had and the strength that he had. And he led the way for three great running backs, Jim Brown, Bobby Mitchell, and Leroy Kelly. That speaks for itself, and he played for 15 years as a starter. Gene wasn't a guy that talked and bragged about himself. He was a pretty quiet person. He wasn't an outgoing person. He just did his job and took pride in doing his job. And when Jim Brown ran well, or Leroy Kelly, or Bobby Mitchell ran well, Gene was happy. I even heard Jim Brown make a statement one time talking about Gene, what speed he had in pulling and leading the way for him to get upfield. And said Gene also had the speed to stay upfield and throw the downfield block, which sprang the runner to make the long run, which was exciting for the fans. I would say Gene was pretty valuable to the team. He made the Pro Bowl, All NFL, and Gene left the game on his own time. Gene's son, Bob Hickerson, called me and asked me if I would present Gene Hickerson. And the fact that Gene has been ill for the last several years, I was a little hesitant because being as close as Gene Hickerson and I were, it's a tough thing for me to do. As you can see right here, as you can see today, I've got to make myself tough when I start talking about Gene. But it's a great honor to be asked to present my best friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, to present Gene Hickerson for enshrinement into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, please welcome Bobby Franklin.
First, I'd like to congratulate all the Hall of Famers and the new inductees that's coming in today. Congratulations. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family of Gene Hickerson, University of Mississippi teammates, Cleveland Brown teammates, and professional football Hall of Famers. I can't begin to tell you what an honor it is for me to stand before you and speak about the class of 2007 inductee, Gene Hickerson, my teammate and friend of 52 years. As a teammate of Gene's at both the University of Mississippi and the Browns, I personally, like many of you, have been waiting and hoping for this honor to be bestowed on him for far too long. Gene has been eligible for the Hall since 1978. For many years, he was a finalist, but with so many other deserving players, he just never seemed to make it. I would like to thank the Senior Selection Committee, led by longtime NFL writer Don Pearson of the Chicago Tribune, for helping correct this oversight. And I would also like to thank Tony Grossi from the Cleveland Plain Dealer for being the champion of Gene Hickerson's. He was probably the one that kept his name alive. Without their help, this day might not have come for Gene and the Cleveland Brown fans. Gene Hickerson will tell you that he had the good fortune to have been able to block for some of the greatest running backs the NFL has ever had, like Jim Brown, Bobby Mitchell, and Leroy Kelly. No one can argue with that, but if you actually talk to those three Hall of Famers today, they will tell you they were the lucky ones to have had Gene Hickerson leading the way through defensive units geared to stop them. In Gene's 15 years with the Browns, they had 9 seasons with a 1,000-yard rusher. Gene will also tell you that he would not be here today without the help of many of his offensive line teammates, like Dick Shafrath, John Wooten, Jim Ray Smith, Monty Clark, John Marr, and Doug Deacon, just to name a few. I recently heard Doug Deacon, a fellow lineman of the 1973 Browns, tell a story about Gene. Doug said that during the 1973 season, the Browns were playing the Houston Oilers, who had a hotshot 22-year-old rookie named John Matusak. Gene, 38 years old at the time, was lined up across from John for the entire ball game. At the beginning of the game, John was really talking some trash to Gene and telling the old man what he's going to do to it. Gene responded by giving him a good lesson in football 101. Matusak finished the game without a tackle or sack and was virtually a non-factor as Cleveland beat the Oilers 42-13. Gene spent his entire career as a member of the Cleveland Browns, a fact that he was extremely proud of. He quietly did his job as well as anyone ever in the NFL. In normal circumstances, I would be almost at the point of introducing my good friend to you, Gene Hickerson. Gene would then step to the podium and tell you how thrilled he is to receive this honor today and crack a joke or two. Unfortunately, he won't be doing that as my friend has become ill in the last year or so and will not be able to speak to you today. Even though he is here, I love Gene Hickerson as if he were my brother. I know his son Bob, his daughter Nancy, his brother Willie, and the remainder of his family and friends and teammates do too. In borrowing these words from another Hall of Famer, Gale Sayers, I would like to ask you all to love Gene Hickerson. In closing, it is my honor to present to you the newest member in Professional Football Hall of Fame and only the second member to come from the University of Mississippi, joining Bruiser Kennard, and the 16th Cleveland Brown to be inducted. Let's hear it for Bob Hickerson, his son, who will be accepting for Gene today. Number 66, Gene Hickerson.
There you see Gene Hickerson's son, Bob, who will be accepting the award on Gene's behalf. Gene, in the last few years, has suffered severely from Alzheimer's. He is here and has been here all weekend long, was at the ceremony Friday night where he was given his gold jacket. But there is his son, Bob, unveiling the bust for Gene Hickerson. And now let's listen to Bob Hickerson step up and honor his father.
I'd like to say it's certainly my privilege and honor to say a few words on behalf of Gene Hickerson. We all wish Gene could be speaking with you, but unfortunately, due to his circumstances, he's unable to do so. Gene was very, very pleased when he did receive the notification that he had been elected into the Hall of Fame. It's a tremendous honor, and it's a well-deserved crowning achievement of his career. In my opinion, Gene is actually joining football royalty. I've been around a lot of these players this week, and I'm in awe of the great talent and wonderful athletes that he is joining into the Hall of Fame. Gene had many supporters who have been pulling for him to achieve this honor over the years, and I'd like to recognize a select few this evening. First, I wish to extend Gene's gratitude to the voting committee that elected him into the Hall of Fame, with a special thank you to Mr. Don Pearson of the Chicago Tribune. It's my understanding that Mr. Pearson stood and spoke for Gene, spoke on his behalf, and I think that held a lot of weight with him actually being elected. Bobby Franklin recognized Tony Grossi, and I'd also like to mention him. Mr. Grossi with the Plain Dealer has written many articles over the years to keep Gene's name in front of the public and just keep reminding people that Gene deserves to be here in the Hall of Fame. So our thanks to him. Also, on behalf of Gene, I'd like to extend his thank you to the Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Browns organization, with a special thank you to Mr. Dino Lucarelli. Mr. Lucarelli is the alumni director for the Browns, and he's been a very good friend and supporter of Gene's for many, many years. And he told Gene, he's told him for years, he said, Gene, when you make it to Canton, I'm going to be right there with you. And he is. He's actually hosting a reception for him later this evening. So. Gene is actually the 16th member of the Cleveland Browns to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And a few of one of my friends actually said, some of the fans have mentioned that they were calling Gene Sweet 16. And I said, well, that might be so, but I believe there's a few defensive backs and a few linebackers that probably wouldn't think Gene is that sweet. So also on his behalf, I'd like to extend his gratitude to the many great athletes that he had a privilege of playing with over the years. We're very grateful to Bobby Franklin for agreeing to be his presenter. It's fitting that Bobby is Gene's presenter because he and Bobby have been best of friends for many, many years, back to Ole Miss days. I'd also like to extend Gene's gratitude to Mr. Jim Houston. Mr. Houston has been very gracious to attend several press events and speak to the media on what it was like playing with Gene over the years and what it was like being a teammate of his. And I'd also like to extend Gene's gratitude to Mr. Doug Deacon and Mr. Dick Shafrath, both who reside in northern Ohio, and both who've been very close to Gene, and they've been great about visiting Gene and checking on him to see how he's doing and following up on his condition and what have you. I've got a short story I'd like to tell about Mr. Shafrath. I don't know if any of you know or not, but Mr. Shafrath and Gene were roommates in the early days, in their early playing days. And the other day I was visiting Gene, and Mr. Shafrath came in, and they had a reputation of being, shall we say, mischievous throughout the years. And Mr. Shafrath leaned over to me and he said, you know, he goes, all of my mischievous ways and all of my bad habits, he said, I learned them all from Gene. And I said, that's funny, Dick. He said the same thing about you. So that's a true story. So I also wish to express Gene's gratitude to the many, many fans that have been pulling for him over the years. Many people have come to me, you know, if they associate my name with his and say, he deserves to be here, he deserves this honor. So I'd like to extend his gratitude with a special thank you to Mr. Dave Sefcik and Mr. Dave Jakubowski. These gentlemen hosted a website that was linked into the members of the voting committee, and they did a great deal on lobbying for Gene to get votes to be elected here. I think the name of the website was Elect Gene Hickerson into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That says it all, isn't it? I also, on Gene's behalf, I'd like to extend his gratitude to some very close friends that he has, Mimi and Jimmy Hall and the Hall family. The Hall family have been great friends for Gene over the years, and they're like his family. They're like his extended family. They help with his care. They help visit him and take care of him, and they've been just wonderful friends of his. So I'd like to recognize them. And I also would like to recognize people very dear to me, my wife Eileen, my daughter Caitlin, and my son Clifton, who are with us. Also, my sister Nancy is with us tonight, and her family. Eileen was instrumental in sending many emails and made many phone calls to ask people to vote for Gene when the time came, and I think she was probably the happiest of all when he finally did get the call. The other day I asked her, I said, Eileen, I said, who's the biggest football fan that you know of? And she paused for a moment. She said, I am. And I said, I can't disagree with that. I believe you. I think you really are. So, lastly, I wish to extend Gene's gratitude and my personal thanks to Mr. Steve Perry and Mr. Joe Horrigan and the entire staff of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Due to his condition, there was a lot of uncertainties about the induction ceremony here and how we would handle it. And the induction process was not a normal process for them. And their staff has been very supportive, and they've been very professional, and they tried to put us at ease, that no matter what came up, no matter what happened, we had a plan for it. So I'd like to extend our thanks to them as well. In closing, I'd like to share a story with you that someone relayed to me years ago. I had a client that in Indiana. His name was Mr. Charles Shaw. And Mr. Shaw is a fine gentleman, and he was an avid Cleveland Browns fan. And he told me that once, after watching a successful Cleveland Browns game in which Hall of Fame running back Leroy Kelly had one of his many outstanding games where he scored several times and gained a lot of yardage, he was being interviewed by a sports journalist. And to set the stage, this was the year after Hall of Fame running back Jim Brown retired. And so the journalist said, Leroy, he said, you just had an outstanding game. He said, you were able to be a backup to Jim Brown for a few years and watch him play. He said, so you probably learned a lot by watching and observing Jim Brown run the football. And he said that Mr. Kelly paused for a moment and said, I did learn a lot by watching Jim Brown run the ball. He said, I learned to follow Gene Hickerson. So at this time, I would ask all of you to please join me in welcoming Gene, who's still leading the way for Hall of Fame running backs Bobby Mitchell, Leroy Kelly, and Jim Brown.
Tommy, what a moment. You grew up watching Gene Hickerson, and there you see those three Hall of Famers.
A wonderful job by his son, Bob Hickerson. But when you see those guys, that's really the reason that I wanted to play football, was because I grew up loving the Cleveland Browns, and they exemplify that.
What a nice moment to have those three Hall of Fame running backs back to support Gene Hickerson. Michael Irvin next on the podium.